Hi everyone, welcome to Musically Driven, and you're listening to the first episode. I know that it's been a long time since you heard from me, and this is a interview that Shavon took with me last semester, when I was getting in the groove of everything, and then I was doing my recital, and a lot of things are happening at once. So I'm so happy that Shavon got on this interview with me last semester, and I'm happy I'm able to put it out and publish it so you guys can all hear it. We had a fabulous discussion, and I'm so excited for you guys to finally listen to the first episode of season 2 of Musically Driven. Hi everyone, welcome to Musically Driven. This is the first episode of season 2, and I'm so excited to tell you guys about the things I've been looking into. Today, I have a special guest with me, Shavon Lloyd. He's an alumni of the Crane School of Music. He's now doing grad school at Julliard. He's a composer, music educator, and a performer, and he just announced his upcoming 2023-2024 performances in September. And I wanted to bring Shavon on to Musically Driven and talk about his contributions to music as a Black music educator, composer, and performer. So now I'll ask Shavon to introduce himself, tell us where he grew up, and his journey in music.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shavon Lloyd. I grew up in Middletown, New York, which is about 2 hours north of New York City in the Hudson Valley area. And my musical journey was kind of paved for me really well through the music education program in Middletown. It was really a strong program. My love for music obviously came from the music I listened to growing up. My parents had great musical taste, and a really eclectic musical taste. You know, my mother had every CD to every every band, every band you could think of, and her iPod was the most eclectic iPod you'd ever see. One second she'd be listening to, you know, the like DMX or Ludacris, and then the next second she'd be listening to Reba or something like the most random, or the most random music. But it was all good stuff. And growing up, I started out doing band in elementary school. I played the euphonium, still one of my favorite brass instruments. And then when I got to middle school, got really into playing jazz trombone. I didn't really start singing until 7th grade in chorus. I was actually trying out for football trying to do football, and got tackled by some big kid, some solid 250-pound 8th grader. And I was walking with a limp, and I went to my mom complaining, and she's like, why are you limping? I was like, well, I got run over by a truck by this kid, and he he and I think he might have dislocated something in my hip. And we went to the doctor, and turned out I needed hip surgery to repin my femur back together. I promise this is relevant. And when that happened, I was out of gym class for such a long time. I don't think I took gym for another 3 years after that, because my hip was so messed up. And so my guidance counselor asked me, what do you want to take in place of gym class? And I said, I'll just take a study hall. She's like, no, you should take chorus. I think you should take chorus. That'd be good for you to do. And I was like, I don't want to take chorus. I don't know if I want to do that. And then I ended up going to chorus, and I ended up loving it after the first class. And here is where I am now. And I ended up joining so many choirs since then. Then I ended up getting into the composition when I was a senior in high school. And from there, it just kind of flourished, and everything just started happening naturally. And now I'm here.
That is such a wild story.
Isn't it?
The whole time my face is just jaw dropped. What? That is so
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah, it was wild to me too, because being a professional musician was not where I thought I would be when I started high school. When I started high school, I was looking into being a lawyer, looking into be a doctor, looking into be all these kind of things. But music kept dragging me in and pulling me in. I was so intrigued by it. I would listen to scores and transcribe them down on paper, trying to like build my ear and train my ear that way. And then from there, starting to arrange things. One of the first things I arranged was "I'll Make a Man Out of You" by Mulan for our men's chorus or a tenor bass choir. And it was great. And then people always ask me about composition, and I got into composing when I was a senior. I was staying after school every day because you know how it is when you're in high school. You're doing like I was doing marching band, scholastic bowl, jazz band, show choir, musicals, the plays, all these ROTC. I was in everything, and I kept asking my parents for money. Like, hey, can I get some money so I can buy food after school? Because I was in school from like 7:30 in the morning to about 9 o'clock at night every day. Because I was in so many extracurriculars and I was doing so many things. So I'd ask them for money, and my mom's like, "You probably should get a job." And I was like, I'm not doing that." But yeah, I was like, "That's not no." And so I decided to look online for any kind of competitions I can try and compete in, any singing competitions, any writing competitions, and then I saw a composition contest, and I ended up submitting a piece that I wrote for it. I had a day to write it because the deadline was like the next day. I submitted a piece for it, and it ended up making it to the finals. And I was like, really? That's surprising. It was for the Manhattan Choral Ensemble in New York City. And they sent me an email in the middle of me auditioning for a scholarship saying, hey, like, congratulations, you're one of the 3 finalists for our competition. You win $500 for just being a finalist. I was like, oh, dope. Like, great, that's exciting. So then I had to go down and work with the choir in like a month before the concert, giving them feedback about how I wanted the piece performed and all this other things, which was really cool, especially being at that time 17. And then we go to the finals, where it was a concert where the choir was performing all 3 of our pieces. And my piece won. And so they gave me another $500 for winning. And then I find out that the 2 finalists were like, one of them was a film composer based in New York, and the other one, which is funny enough, now that I think about it, was a Julliard teaching fellow, which was like, oh, okay, like cool. And to saying this not to be like, oh, like I beat them or whatever, because that's not really what it was. It was the audience had to decide which one was their favorite of the 3 pieces, and they chose mine. But it was cool to see like all the different elements that came together to make music happen. Like this choir came together, you have this conductor, you have these composers, the audience has to, and everything is working together in order to create some sort of experience for these people. And it was so cool. And then I was like, yeah, I definitely want to go pursue music and pursue like I want to write music, I want to teach, I want to sing, I want to conduct. I loved conducting at the time too. And so it just really wanted to try everything and just explore and continue to be a storyteller.
That is like so cool. Like you were telling the story, I was like I said, jaws dropped.
well, well, it's funny because I did that contest because I wanted money for pizza, and then it kind of shaped how like the next 4 years of my life as I went forward to go to college. But my mom would tell you that I always think with my stomach, so that's a perfect example of why that's true.
So when you did go to Crane, did you ever, because you said you played the euphonium, so did you ever do like a double concentration in Crane, or did you just voice, or did you do?
No. I started as a double major
Mhm.
in music ed and composition. And that was great. It was a little strenuous at the time. I was so stressed out. There's so many reasons why I ended up dropping the composition major, but mostly it just became so much. And I like the idea of writing without deadlines and without specifications on okay, we need you to write a piece by March 1st or whatever. Like I don't like writing that way because it's or at the time I didn't like writing that way. Now that's I just write by deadlines like many other composers. But at the time I was like, I need time to be able to flesh these ideas out without feeling like I had to make the beat the clock or whatever. But I really I love playing euphonium. I wish I got to play more when I was in college. I really did like that instrument. But singing called me instead, and I got the bug.
But I want to see like how have your experiences as musicians just shaped who you are, period. So like not just as a musician, but like you as your character and your traits.
Um, it's a good question. It's they kind of go hand in hand. My experience as a human and my experience as a musician kind of feed into one another. I think part of the reason why I became a musician was because of the collaborative nature of it, interacting with people, coming together with people to tell a story, whether you're in a choir or on stage with a collaborative pianist, or you're writing a piece for an ensemble, or you're playing euphonium or trombone or whatever. It's like we're there to tell stories, and I loved coming together with people to tell these stories and to share these stories. And in doing so, and being a musician, it's taught me to be empathetic to people who are different than I am. It's taught me to really, especially as a singer, I'm always playing different characters and exploring different roles where you have to think so differently than what you already do. And it's changed my worldview about how I approach certain things, how I approach certain people, because it's usually when we interact with new people, we always start with like this guard up because we never know like which way it's going to go. But I being a musician and playing these different characters or whatever has made me try to find a doorway in, and when I'm interacting with these people, and no two people are the same. That's the other thing that's really exciting. You go into an opera rehearsal and you meet the conductor and you meet the rehearsal pianist and you meet the cast and you meet you meet whoever, or you go into a class at Julliard or class at Crane, and everybody is coming from a completely different background, a completely different story. Even if they're from the same area, they have two completely different stories, or like whatever. It's like that's so exciting, and how they all come together to share one common goal and telling a story is so exciting to me. And I love teaching. When I was teaching, it was all about getting my students to use music as a tool to express themselves, but to also understand the world around them. And so so as a musician, it's really made me think about the way I teach. Am I here to just show up and just conduct for a concert and then just go home and do that twice a year, every year until I retire? It's like, that's not really what I'm about. I'm about getting people to think and to experience and to want to have conversations, tough conversations, and use art as a means to do that. And so that it's really made me think about so many things from so many different angles, and it's made me so many great connections with so many great people who, if I weren't doing what I'm doing now, I probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet. I'm sure you feel the same way being a music student at Crane.
Yeah, I do feel like that a lot in Crane. I always think like, and I tell my parents this all the time, and I think that's sometimes why, because I'm the only like musician in my house. Like my mom used to sing when she was young, and my dad, he actually was a visual artist when he was younger, and he went to FIT for a while, but then life happened, all this stuff. But so I've grown up with a lot of like artistic people in my life, but like pursuing this like at a collegiate level and then continuing to want to have music surrounded in my life for like a really long time as like a physician, like a professional, like yeah, physician. I think it's definitely made my mindset and how I view things a lot different. So like I feel like sometimes compared to my parents, I see things from a more outside view. Like everything is just kind of like more empathetic, or like more like I guess like understanding to different journeys and things. I don't know. It's like weird. It's like everything's like I don't want to say hippie, but everything's like everything's gonna be okay.
No, but hey, the hippies got it right then. I think that's the way. There's nothing there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. I feel like that, like, it's important to be able to understand why people are the way that they are. Why, people write plays and write compositions and write operas and write movies based on this very like concept, right? It's as a doorway into understanding how the not so average mind works, or maybe how the average mind works. And I think that's really exciting about art, especially art today. We're seeing a lot more representation for in all art, not just the classical music, but in all art, for people of color, for people in the LGBTQIA community, people in people of different genders, and it's cool. It's exciting because it's like when I turn on a movie that's made in the last year, it's not the same story being told by the same kind of faces over and over again. We're starting to really dig into that, and one of the challenges of being in classical music is that it feels like it takes forever for that progress to happen, for us to see that. In opera in particular, it's like it's so opera is so slow to move. We're seeing that diversity now, but it's even with the diversity, you're still telling the same old story with with the same kind of visual components to it. I mean, I've seen productions of Tosca. It's like it's the same. It's Tosca. Tosca is going to be what Tosca is going to be, and like it's like it's Tosca. It's like you can't do much with Tosca, or not that you can't do much with Tosca. I just haven't seen much with Tosca or seen different things. But it's exciting now that we're seeing more people of color and minority people from minority groups composing new work and telling you stories, not just in opera, but in musical theater and on TV, on Netflix. I love seeing these Netflix specials and these Netflix shows and all these other things. It's just like, oh, like, great, Black people. That's exciting. Like,
Literally.
it's true. It's very true. I it's a good time to be an artist because now people are yearning for it. We're craving it.
And I agree with you because it's like so interesting, especially like being in Crane and like Crane is it's like it's a lot of like non-people of color in Crane. And so sometimes you'll talk to people and you feel the disconnect, of like, well, this is important. And then some people are like, yeah, this is important. And some people are like, well, and then your brain is like, no, like this is so
Ah,
important.
yeah, it's tough, and it was the same way, same kind of thing when I went to Crane, and just that's just college or music school, mindset. It's like we want so bad to move forward, but what we've had in the past is really comfortable. I mean, we already have a system that works and it's cozy and it's nice, and why change it? But we change it because of exactly what you just said. We need to change it because when we interact with people who are different than us and they can't understand or relate, or not relate, but they can't sympathize with what we're talking about when we say there's a need for change, it's like that means that they've only seen things from one perspective in their entire life, and that's boring. But also it's we're enabling complacency. We're enabling people to stay stuck in one worldview, and that's so strange to me. Art has always been an opportunity for people to see the world from a different lens and to empathize, and I would imagine then that in music schools, art schools across the country, that it would be places like that first that would be pushing the initiative to diversify and to challenge the status quo. But again, you have people in these places who are so comfortable doing what they already know, because and there's great reason for that, right? It's like they're comfortable doing what they already know because that's what they grew up in. It's like, wait, what do you mean we should do a musical at Julliard? Like, it's like, this is a classical school. Like, we've done classical this entire time, and that's what classical, classical. Like, that's all. And that's what made them fall in love with music. And I wish that music education um taught, whether music education professors or the teachers or whatever, went in from a lens of, okay, how, instead of trying to convince our students to fall in love with music the way that we fell in love with it, how can we convince them to, or not convince them, but how can we give them the tools and the skills necessary to fall in love with music and art in their own way? And I think if we did that, it would go a long way in making places, schools and universities, conservatories, a lot more inclusive and and progressive, and moving us in a right direction. And that doesn't mean in absence or in lieu of classical music, but it means alongside, with the same level of academic fortitude that you would give classical music.
I talk about this at Crane all the time because even while doing this project, I feel like I've gotten a lot of like I guess conversation about, well, my feelings on classical music. And I was like, no, I love classical music. Like I started singing classical music when I was in middle school. Uh, I liked like the golden age of musical theater growing up. So like I that's what I do like this stuff, but I also think it's important to try to do different things by different composers. Like no offense to Schumann. Schumann's great, but I don't want to sing Clara and Robert all the time. you know. But this does bring me to the next thing I want to talk to you about. So I read that you are really active in NYSSMA, which I guess for people who don't know, NYSSMA, it stands for New York State School Music Association, and you work with the Belonging, Equity, Diversity, and Representation Committee and the Composition Committee. So do you ever have like the conversation of appropriation versus appreciation in education, and then how do you go about those conversations when music is being appropriated in a musical setting?
Okay, so first I should say that um, my presence on those committees is on hold now that I'm in grad school. So, but when I was on those committees 2 years ago, I was on there, yeah, for the 2 years ago. We would have these conversations all the time. The challenge with committees like this, and this is across the board, this is not just a NYSSMA thing, is we want to move forward. We like, it's verbalized. We want to make this system work for everybody, basically. The challenge with that is they also only know what they know. You have to remember who is in the room, their background, their perspective, their point of view. When you're a young teacher in a room with veteran teachers for 20 plus years, they have a different view. They think, or they believe that, you know, the classical approach to music is the way to go, and they believe that because it's worked for them, and they have no reason to believe otherwise, right? To your question about appropriation versus appreciation, we've had those conversations, and the challenge is, how do we become inclusive and representative of all these different cultures in our classrooms and music education circles, and the collegiate level, as well as K-12? How do we become inclusive of this music without appropriating it? If because and the argument that I would get a lot is, I feel like if I do some music that is of a diverse background or different ethnic background, I don't have the skills to authentically convey this music to my students. And that is a fair fear, or not fear, but fair. That's a fair conclusion to come to. I as a white person, I don't know if I can effectively communicate African folk music to my students, or effectively and or authentically. And to that, I always said, you're not German, but you know how to teach Beethoven. You're not Italian, but you know how to teach Monteverdi and all these other composers. So what is the difference between that, teaching that, and teaching music of people by music by people of color or by women or whatever, right? It's like the difference is, in my brain, for them, is that they feel that if they don't look like the people that they represent, or the people that their music represents, then they shouldn't teach it, and it gives them an excuse to stay in that space of let's just keep doing what we're doing, because we know for a fact no one will buck up against us for teaching Bach incorrectly, right? Not in the same way that they'll buck up against us for teaching a Haitian folk song incorrectly. And there's a fear of coming across as racist and all this other stuff. And my response to that is approach it the same way, with research, with with reading and attending professional development and gaining community with people who are experts in these different fields. When I was teaching high school choir, we did pieces in Arabic, we did pieces in Mandarin. I don't speak Arabic. I definitely don't speak Mandarin. So it's like I had to invite people to give us authentic pronunciations, and I had to look into the authentic pronunciation, authentic culture. Why is this song where does this song come from? This, that, and the other thing. And that, like, to me, the effort needs to be there just as much as it needs to be in all these other aspects of it. You can be white and teach a spiritual, but it's the way that you go about doing it, right? If you are doing a spiritual and it's not an authentic vocal experience for your students, you're robbing them of learning about this true experience, and you're robbing yourself of the knowledge to then pass on to future generations as an educator. So to me, like the debate, the appropriation versus appreciation debate wouldn't even be present if we approach things as authentically and as and with the same good faith that we approach classical music. Right? I mean, that seems, that to me, that's not even a conversation. Why are we, like, if you are a white professor or conductor or whatever, and you pick music by Moses Hogan, let's say, like, he arranged a bunch of spirituals. How can you incorporate the educational aspect so that you can then encourage and inspire your students to go do the research and look into why spirituals were being sung, like spirituals were being sung to communicate code to from one enslaved person to another. We talk about and like spirituals had all these deep meanings. Their ties to their religion, their ties to work. A lot of them were work songs, and how these people who were enslaved at the time found ways to communicate in like the most incredible way that you can possibly think of, right? It's like that is exciting. I told my students this, and they're just like, wow, like they didn't even know all of this, and it makes so much of a difference when it shows how incredible music is in bringing people together, but also shows like how in even some of the worst circumstances, people found a reason to make music. Like that's inspiring, and that's teaching, in my opinion. Some people disagree with me, but hey, that's that's their beef.
So now I'm just gonna move on to, because there was a question I did really want to ask you, because I think I'm going to look into Scott Joplin this year, because Dr. Brooks, I think Dr. Brooks does a really, really great job with introducing different stuff to the classroom. I love the way she teaches. So She introduced Scott Joplin the other day, and I knew who he was, but I just wasn't, I never like paid attention that hard. Especially, it's weird because I did do like I did do a whole research on jazz, but I think I just kind of like separated ragtime for a while when I was doing it. Um,
Mhm.
so I knew who he was, but I when she was telling us his story, I was like, oh, this guy is cool. So I know he did an all black production of Tremantia, and I wanted to know like what is his compositions? How is his compositions different from like an regular opera? Like because he is a ragtime composer, so how did any of his compositions like differ from an opera, like an opera that's by a regular white?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, that's actually really interesting that you asked that because this was one of the sort of challenges that we had when putting this opera together. Treemonisha is originally it was one of was I think I don't remember if it was exactly his first opera, or if it was one of his first, because I think he wrote two or three, but Treemonisha was it is very classical in nature, actually. It's you see aspects of the ragtime sort of like sort of ideas. Scott Joplin was a ragtime pianist, so you can hear that in a lot of the string writing, um, and a lot of the orchestration in general. Um, you kind of get these ragtime players, but a lot of it was felt really classical in nature, and so we always had this debate when we were putting it on: should we really lean into some of the natural swing of this music, or should we keep it fairly straight as it's being written? And have you listened to the music at all yet?
Not really. I listened to like a little bits and pieces of it, but I've never like listened to it all straight through.
Yeah, it's the music is so interesting because the melodies and the rhythm of it feels so ragtimey and um feels so different than other operas because it has that ragtime influence. But when you're doing it, it's so rooted in classical musicianship, and anybody who tries to relegate it to something less than is so weird to me because we sang through this music and we're finding this cool groove in all these pieces that you wouldn't otherwise find in like these lyric operas like these Puccini's, um but it's the same orchestration, and just this really fantastical kind of writing for its time. So it was different from in that same season we did Puccini's Tosca, we did Susanna by Carlisle Floyd, and we did Mozart's Così fan tutte, and it was so different because the character work, it being rooted in blackness at that, especially at that time, created a whole different layer of performance that we otherwise wouldn't get in a Susanna or in a Tosca. But I shouldn't say we. I can only speak for myself. I feel like in Treemonisha, the singing that music was, it didn't feel necessarily different than singing a lot of the other classical stuff or classically oriented stuff, because in my opinion it's not different, but it had, because of the characters that he wrote his own libretto for it, so he wrote all these characters and wrote for, and as well as the music, and it felt so natural and so fantastical, and the plot is so interesting. It's such a cool story. And some people feel that the music, or the opera as a whole, Treemonisha, is not very strong. But that's because they're comparing it to all these European greats, like heavy hitters, but what it does have is a charm and a really beautiful construction from beginning to end that tells an amazing story, and I love it. I loved being a part of it. Um, it was such a different, doorway into opera. Especially, there's lots of people who were in the audience who hadn't been, to opera at all. I remember, it's funny. I got into an Uber with a guy, with the driver. He said to me, he's like, because he picked me up from the opera house, and he was like, "Hey, so are you in the operas?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm in Treemonisha. I'm one of the leads in Treemonisha." And he said, "I just saw that. That was my first opera ever, and it was so good. Like I've never seen an opera before, and it really like spoke to me, like the connection to the all black cast, this this the themes with this black woman being empowered. Like I loved seeing that. Like it was so cool. Like, and then he started to ask me about all these other operas that we're doing. Like, oh, tell me more about this. Like, what is it?" And it was like a great doorway in, because it was like listening to this great story, and the music was so heartwarming and so compelling. So it was so accessible. Is really that's the short way of saying all of that, is that it was really accessible, and it was really charming, and it was really not it's not that it wasn't different from that it was different from being classical, but it was really good about um uh the character work that the music brought to it, and it helped us bring it alive even more than I could have in something else. Personally, I should.
Right, it's just so cool. This brings me to like a conversation that we did have in class once. And she was talking, and I think Dr. Brooks was talking about I think she was talking about Black composers. I can't remember if it was Scott Joplin or someone else, but it was saying like this music is like dirty or inappropriate or something like that. And I always think about how every time people of color ever introduce something into like a classical realm or into any like realm of music, it is like heavily criticized. And then until it is not taken, I don't, oh, maybe taken or shifted into something that I guess is more European or not as, I don't know, raunchy, like that people start to praise it or people begin to praise it like later on. And I think I raised my hand and I talked to, because I'm a big, like, I love the history of hip hop. I don't know what it is. I freaking love it. I think it's probably because I'm from the Bronx, but I love it. I love the history of hip hop. So I talked to Dr. Brooks about like even hip hop was really heavily criticized, and it was only really for people within those neighborhoods because it was so heavily criticized outside of it. So I just wanted to know your thoughts on that, like on like over time how about people of color will make music and is heavily criticized to then now being like praised and like now something that's like culturally popular or societally popular.
Yeah, that's a good prompt. I think what's really interesting is that, because the challenge is you have two sides to that, right? You have it becoming like Treemonisha became now is getting a resurgence a little bit. It hasn't had that many performances. I think someone told me that our production of Treemonisha was like the ninth production it's ever had in the world, or something like that. Like it hasn't had that many production, and it got written in what 1910 or something, like early 1900s. So it hasn't had a lot of performances, but I think the more representation that we get in these spaces, the more we start to see how like people need room to be able to make this art come alive. And talk about hip hop becomes popular. Like it's so funny because people don't expect hip hop to become popular. I'll even take it a step back, like when it started out, because it started out as protest music, and was heavily politicized and all this other stuff. But before, like, you think about like Ray Charles. Ray Charles was writing music that people didn't want to become mainstream because they thought it was too sexual or too he was a black man, and they were really racist, so that was also part of it. They didn't want this black man over this radio. But at the end of the day, you cannot deny how music makes people feel. And there's like black music in America has made people feel all over this world. Like it is so popular, and it's so infectious, and it defines cultural movements. It's been assigned to and attached to cultural movements, like from civil rights to Black Lives Matter. Like it's been all these. This music has become so important and so relevant, and hip hop in particular was such a doorway in for people to see like how Black people were living in America. And it's like that. And like I said, you have to tell these stories because people just think we're lying, and we're just we're like people like when I think about Black Lives Matter, and people are saying, oh well, we shouldn't be talking about this, we shouldn't be talking about that. I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me, because if we incorporate and we represented people, Black people in particular in this case, more in schools and talked about the actual history and talked about like what this actually looked like talk about the effects of slavery after the Emancipation Proclamation, like how that affected Black Americans down the line, then people would have a more empathetic or sympathetic ear to the issues that we have going on now. And so because we never had that voice, that's where all these major art forms start to come in, where you have these Black artists making this music about police brutality, about lack of government action, about the neglect in these neighborhoods. It's like all these things, like that's the power of it. And I think it's always funny that it always starts out with that criticism. You're right. It starts out with the criticism because people don't want to be hit with that reality in the face. But then you throw on that beat, it's a whole different conversation. It's a whole nother conversation. And hip hop in particular has been such an effective tool in getting people to listen and understand like what is going on in this world. So that's really how I feel about it. And I think the more that we incorporate that mindset into art today, especially in classical conservatories and in just classical performance spaces, here's what the situation is. This is what the experience of is like for Black people in this country, or for the Latinx community or LGBT or whatever. It's like we need to foster more art to be created by these people. And fine, you can criticize it, but at the end of the day, it is representative of real world experiences. It is truth. It's not, we're not making this up. Who would sit around and just make up oppression? That's weird. Like that's silly to me. But on the flip side, because I said there was two sides to this, going back to the whole hip hop thing, it's like we also need to get to a point, in my opinion, where marginalized groups are writing things that talk about empowerment of these groups. So it's important to show like the struggles and the strife, so we get people to understand our story and where we came from and where we're going. But it's also important to show us on stage being empowered. Like I love seeing what Beyonce has done in the last 5-10 years with her music. It's not my particular cup of tea musically, but like this revolution that she's been doing. But one of my favorite performances is her at the Super Bowl with Bruno Mars. Have you seen that? That's one of my favorite performances, and she's up there in her militant sort of outfit, and she's leading this charge of strong Black women. Like I love seeing that stuff. Like that to me shows that we are not just our oppression, we are not just our strife. Like we have so much to offer, and history has shown that consistently.
I think that in that conversation always happens, especially in the media too. Like when we see like Black movies, and I think I saw a post, I can't remember if it was on Instagram, but it's like, when is the Black girl gonna have her coming of age story? Like,
thank you.
Like why is every story just like super insane, and you're just like, why can't you just be a normal girl?
I've said this, we're really gonna talk about it. I've said this for forever. Like, if you think about, and like, because I'm a big Broadway person, if you look at any Broadway musical that features Black people in any way, right? It's like, it's usually them being poor or them being oppressed or them dealing with racism or whatever have you. Even the most recent ones. You look at A Strange Loop. A Strange Loop came out. It's about this young black gay man who is writing. He's in this loop of dealing with his inner anxieties about being a gay man who's black, who's attracted to white men, and da 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 da. Okay, right. That's great. That's a great perspective, and we should look into that. But also, you look at Paradise Square and Ragtime. Ragtime is about the racism during Jim Crow, or during, like, in the early, is it Jim? Yeah, during Jim Crow, and how that led to this man feeling like he had to take his own rights in his own hand. Once on This Island, about these poor peasants, these black peasants on this Haitian island. It's like, can we just have like a story where this black couple meet and it all works out in the end, or like this black woman just she finds them, she's empowered at work, and she becomes this independent black woman, and she, like, something like, I don't know, that's just me off the top of my head. Like, I just think about all the stories that have been traditionally and cast as white, and I'm just like, anybody could play this. Like, we could have a Mrs. Doubtfire who's black. We could have a 13 going on 30 based on black characters. Like, all these rom-com. The Notebook could be black, could be Latino, could be Latinx, could be Asian representation. All these other things. It's like we're telling these same stories over and over again, and like, it blows my mind that we're still only casting white people in them. I just don't understand. And I think part of it is that people feel like if you cast black people in these roles, then it won't feel authentically black. I'm just like, what does that mean in the case of just day-to-day existence? Like, if you're writing a story about these two people who are in love, and one of them ends up going into the military and writing letters, like a Dear John letter or whatever, it's like, okay, those could be anybody. Anybody could be going through that situation. There are black people in the military. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, the fact that saying this is controversial in any way is weird to me, because we keep putting black people and just people of color in these boxes. And it's like, no, like, we can be, like, black people in particular can excel and have excelled and show their excellence and our excellence and our beauty and all this other stuff. But we can be boring too. And I would love to see a movie where black people are boring and just trying to find a man, trying to find a woman, just go into the store. You know, like I just finished watching Insecure, which I love that show. I just finished. I hadn't seen it, and my friends are like, "Sean, you need to see this."
Oh my gosh, I just finished it the last summer. Like, we just, yeah.
It's so good, because for that exact reason. It shows all these different types of black people existing. You have your nerds, you have your I also like the show Dear White People on Netflix. Right? Have you seen that too? Love that show. And it shows all these different kinds of black people, gay black people, straight black people, nerdy, people who came from the neighborhood, that like all these different aspects of it. It's like, that's what we want to see. We don't want to see that. I think continuing down that path of representation, of positive representation, empowering representation, and you can find conflict in there without going down the deep end.
And it is two sides to that too, of like, yes, we want our stories to be told and seen. Like we talked about earlier, of like why would we make this up? Like what? Like why would we make this up? But at the same time, it is very healthy to see us in a positive light. Like and especially for young people when they do watch these things in media, like it is important for them to see representation in a positive light. And that was why I felt like Little Mermaid. I went to see the Little Mermaid, and that was so big for me. My boyfriend took me to go see it, and I like started crying. And he's like, "Why are you crying?" I'm like, "Because like the little black girl in me is like freaking out, because this is something that I didn't grow up with until Princess Tiana came out, until I was like 8."
Yeah. Oh my God, you were 8 when that came out? Oh my God, am I old? How old was what is When did that come out? I thought that came out like 3 years ago. No, but I saw it for the first time 3 years ago, Princess and the Frog, and I cried for Princess and the Frog. Soul, even and granted, I have my own beef with those movies about like altering the appearance of black people in these animated shows, but for what they were great. And for me, growing up, I had like what did I have as far as media representation? I had Everybody Hates Chris. I had, which was like, this representation of this boy living in the hood with his family, dealing with crackheads and robbers and all this other stuff. And I grew up, but I also grew up with like great sitcoms. Not that Everybody Hates Chris wasn't great, because it was, but I grew up with like the Bernie Mac show and My Wife and Kids. Yeah, both of those shows are great. Um, the Fresh Prince of Bel Air and all these other things, which really good. But you know, one of the things I think about all the time when it comes back to music, people always ask me, why is representation so important? Like what, like, and they ask it with good faith, but the reason is, if you think about the little Tatianas and the little Shavons, who are sitting in these classrooms growing up, and all they see is a white male composer being taught by a white teacher in a school surrounded by white people. And then they go from elementary school to middle school to high school, looking at that. It's like there's no part of me that I'm seeing in the music I'm making. And it becomes, you had, like, for me personally, I had this whole in undergrad when I went to Crane, I felt so disconnected from who I was. Like, I remember before I even started doing music, classical music, for me, it was Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Patti LaBelle, like all these great black artists, John Legend, Jennifer Hudson, like Beyonce, right? Alicia Keys, Aaliyah, like I can name all. That's who I was listening to, and then like that just started to fade as I went into school. School wasn't teaching me how to embrace that part of my musicianship, and so I always, when I was in college, I was like, "Am I here because this is the music I want to be making, or am I here because this is the music that is what I have to be making?" You know, and that's why I think representation is important, because you're if you do not diversify and show people themselves in the art that they're creating, then they're not creating art. They're just reciting what they want you, or meaning those in the on the upper echelon, what you want us to be doing. You know, it's like, that's not art then, in my opinion.
Question I always ask is, what is music like right now that's speaking to you? It could be any genre, anything that you're thinking of, like anything that's just speaking to you right now.
Oh, I love that question. It's funny that you asked that, because I'm going through like this like huge music cleanup. Like I'm on my Apple Music, like I'm listening to so much new stuff now.
Mhm.
I'm listening to uh, like Izzy Bizu, Miles,
Oh, yes.
Floyd Fuji, John Vinyl, Nana Fofi, yeah, like all these like independent artists who, around the R&B sort of sphere, Leon Bridges, uh yeah, like all Daniel Caesar, like, and just something different. I've felt like I was listening a lot to the oldies, because I love acoustic music. I love my Stevie Wonder, my hit me with that, that jazz band in the back and the horns and whatever. I love that old style music. But now, especially after watching Insecure, like the music that they put on that show was really good. And so I was like, let me Shazam this, let me add this in. And now my musical tastes are sort of like evolving, and it's nice. It's nice to hear different styles, and dive into that and just hear a whole different world. Especially going to Julliard, you hear classical music all day, every day. It's just a nice break away from it. I love it. So it's good.
Which, yes, I totally agree. I think, like, because I always talk about, like, at the very end, like what I've been listening to recently. I've been listening to Yeba. I've never listened to Yeba before.
Yeah,
Like,
but love
my
you.
At the acapella groups on campus, I guess specifically like what I forgot what they're called, the pots and pitches. They love
Yes,
arranging yeba.
of
So
course.
but I've never like got into her. The only time I've heard Yeba was Yeba's Heartbreak and Drake's album, and that was really good. So I listened to her album. Oh, so good. I listened to it on
He's
repeat. Yeah.
the first time I heard Yebo was on PJ Morton's live album of what's that? I think he has a what's the name of that album? Gumbo? Yeah, Gumbo Unplugged. This is like the a live acoustic version, which I prefer to the actual Gumbo album. And he had her come on and sing "How Deep Is Your Love" with him by the Bee Gees. So they did a cover of it, and she sang. I was like, okay, come on, vocals. I was like, you better work. I was like, and then you just start exploring her, and she is incredible. It's like I love seeing it, hearing her. Jasmine Sullivan is constantly killing the game too. Like just these great singers, and the music they're writing um is so illustrative. Like it's so good. I don't know. I love it. They know how to hit the soul.
Oh my God, they really do. But I want to make sure I thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it so much. I can't wait till Dr. Marcella and Dr. Brooks hear it. They're gonna be like, yeah.
Oh, give them my best. They're my favorite. I have always said, and I will always say it. I met and worked with some of the best professors at Crane, and those two are on that list. They're great. And I really do wish them all the best. And I hope to see them soon. Fingers crossed.
Hi, everyone. I am just closing out saying thank you for listening to Musically Driven. I'm so excited to continue to make episodes this semester. Last semester, I kind of fell off. Well, I fell off, period. And I'm really, really happy that I'm able to publish Shavon's interview. And thank you so much, Shavon. I know I said it at the beginning, but I didn't release this till now. And we recorded this, I think, maybe in October. So, yeah. So thank you so much, Shavon. And I hope you guys listen to more episodes. I hope I have more people coming on the show. And I hope that I continue to like interest you guys. And I hope these topics interest you. And I wish you guys the best. Bye.
Danney, you are amazing.